There are people who move through life with a certain lightness, untouched by the deeper currents beneath everyday moments. And then there are those who feel everything, who notice everything. Not just what is said, but what is left unsaid. Not just what happens, but what it means. These are the ones who carry the quiet weight of awareness. This is the story of someone who became too aware. It didn't happen all at once. It began slowly, almost invisibly. A habit of observing more than speaking. A tendency to pause longer than others before responding. A mind that replayed moments not to dwell, but to understand. At first, it felt like a gift. Being able to read people, sense emotions, and understand hidden layers gave a sense of clarity. It created the illusion of control. But awareness, when it grows without balance, stops feeling like clarity and starts feeling like noise. Every interaction became a puzzle. A simple conversation was no longer simple, it carried subtext, tone shifts, micro-expressions, and hidden meanings. Silence was never just silence, it was interpreted as distance, disinterest, or tension. A delayed reply felt like rejection. A change in someone's voice carried weight. The mind began filling gaps with possibilities, most of them heavy. The world became louder, not in sound, but in interpretation. And with that came exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that lives in the chest, in the constant scanning, analyzing, predicting. It became impossible to just be. Even moments of peace were interrupted by thought loops. What if something was missed, misunderstood, or about to go wrong? Awareness turned inward too. Every flaw became magnified. Every mistake replayed endlessly. There was no escape from the mind's scrutiny. It questioned everything, decisions, intentions, worth. It searched for reasons behind feelings, then searched again when the answers didn't feel complete. The more aware the mind became, the less safe it felt. This is where anxiety quietly takes root, not always as panic, but as constant alertness. A feeling that something is always slightly off. That something needs to be fixed, understood, or prevented. The mind tries to protect, but in doing so, it creates tension. And alongside anxiety, something heavier begins to settle. A quiet sadness. Because when someone becomes too aware, they don't just see their own struggles, they see the world differently. They notice disconnection where others see normalcy. They sense emotional distance, unspoken pain, hidden loneliness in people around them. They begin to understand how much is carried silently by everyone. And that awareness can feel isolating. It becomes harder to relate in simple ways. Harder to enjoy moments without analyzing them. Harder to feel present when the mind is always one step ahead, questioning meaning. This is the paradox of deep awareness, it brings understanding, but also distance. At some point, the mind starts asking a different question. Not what is happening, but why can't I stop thinking about what is happening? And this is where the shift begins. Because the problem was never awareness itself. Awareness is not the enemy. It is a powerful tool. It allows empathy, insight, growth. It helps people understand themselves and others on a deeper level. But like any tool, when it is overused or misdirected, it begins to harm instead of help. The real struggle was not being aware, it was being unable to turn it off. The mind had learned to analyze everything, but it had not learned how to rest. And rest is not something awareness naturally allows. So the journey changed direction. Instead of trying to understand more, the focus slowly shifted to feeling less pressure to understand everything. Instead of searching for deeper meanings in every moment, there was an effort to accept that not everything needs to be explained. This was not easy. Letting go of constant analysis felt unnatural at first. It felt like losing control. But over time, something subtle began to change. Moments started to feel lighter. Not because awareness disappeared, but because it softened. It stopped trying to solve everything. It began to observe without immediately interpreting. The mind learned something new. It learned that not every thought deserves attention. Not every feeling needs to be dissected. Not every silence holds meaning. Some things simply are. And that realization created space. Space where there was once tension. Space where the mind could breathe. Awareness didn't vanish, it transformed. It became selective instead of constant. Intentional instead of automatic. It was no longer a flood, but a quiet stream that could be stepped into when needed. And with that, something else returned. Presence. The ability to sit in a moment without analyzing it. To experience without evaluating. To feel without needing to explain. It wasn't perfect. The mind still wandered. It still questioned. But it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a choice. And that changed everything. Because being too aware was never about having too much understanding. It was about carrying it without balance. True strength was not in seeing everything, it was in knowing when to look away. Not in understanding every emotion, but in allowing some to exist without explanation. Not in controlling every thought, but in letting some pass without resistance. This is what those who are deeply aware eventually discover. That peace is not found by thinking more, but by needing to think less. That clarity is not always about answers, but about acceptance. And that the mind, no matter how powerful, is not meant to hold the weight of everything at once. So the story doesn't end with awareness disappearing. It ends with awareness finding its place. No longer overwhelming. No longer exhausting. But quiet. Steady. Supportive. A tool, not a burden. And in that balance, life becomes something it hadn't been for a long time. Not something to analyze, but something to finally experience.